Today I received a package in the mail containing my brand new iPhone 4 that I lost last summer at a beach house. Last week a woman who rented the place found my phone, charged it up, looked up my contact info, and mailed it to me. What's the nicest thing a complete stranger has ever done for you? I was a poor grad student on a long, 12-ish hour train ride. I gave my mom a call on my cell to tell her that my trip had gone well, and mentioned that I was hungry but only had enough money for a bag of chips because I was low on cash. I suppose an older woman with her family must have overheard, as about an hour later she began to make small talk with me. We chatted about the scenery for a while, and then she began asking me about my studies, cultural anthropology. Around dinner time she invited me to the dining car to dine with her family, her husband and grown son. I declined and she said that she was sorry to bother me, but she'd always been interested in cultural anthropology but hadn't had any opportunity to study it. She said she would treat me to dinner if I would do her the favor of telling her about what I studied. It was so gracefully done. She knew that I didn't want to accept a free meal, so she made it seem as if I was doing her a favor. I had lamb and wine and dessert, and it was one of the best meals I've ever had. Her kindness and the subtle way she pulled it off without making me feel low was a really beautiful thing. What a classy lady. I'm in grad school at night and nanny during the day, which equals completely broke. Last year I took my car in for its 90,000 mile service and found out it needed $2,500 in repairs, my entire savings account at the time. When I went in to pick up the car, I had the boy I take care of with me. He was about 2 at the time. I must have been clearly flustered and overwhelmed with keeping track of the baby while switching his car seat back into my car from the rental, and I was clearly distressed about the cost. I think the woman typing up the invoice must have thought I was a struggling, young, single mother. As she typed in each item, she would loudly exclaim, "Oops, made a typo. Oh well." She did this for every item, a few bucks here and there, until she saved me $500 by deliberately fricking up the invoice. This was at a dealership where they have a no haggle policy. I really hope her manager never caught the mistake. I don't think she has any idea how much she helped me. TLDR. In my poorest of days, woman at car shop saved me $500 on repairs by making deliberate typos while she wrote up my invoice. Amazingly nice stranger, or soon to be fired moron, in both cases amazing. I went to a very poor inner city high school. When I was in high school, my favorite teacher went on a trip, and while waiting for her flight home she began crying quietly, due to the fact that our unprivileged student body would forever be unprivileged. I'm keeping that vague for anonymity's sake. In an airport, a gentleman approached her in consolation. She spilled her guts out to him about her sorrow. It turned out that he was a very rich man, and they exchanged contact information. With that information, my teacher and this generous man created a system in which, annually, she sends him an email with a list of kids, the school they're going to, and the amount of money they'll need for the year. He then writes a check in a lump sum and my teacher splits it up and has the bookkeeper send it to the universities. Without this assistance I wouldn't have been able to go to school. He refuses to take any credit for it, and to this day, no one but my old English teacher knows his identity. TLDR. A complete stranger is paying my college tuition. Holy crap, that is amazing. I hope you do something great with it. After being mugged at gunpoint in DC, the guys who mugged me must have thrown my wallet in a trash can. A homeless man mailed it back to me at his own expense. I got back my license, social security card, pitter to replace, and a few other precious things that I thought I'd lost forever, including my wallet. He wrote a short letter explaining who he was and telling me to basically pay it forward. I wish I could have gotten a chance to thank him somehow. There are a bunch of neat Good Samaritan stories over in our uplifting news. Feel free to swing by to share or just read some of them. Thanks for showing me this. Also maybe the greatest upvote to downvote ratios ever on Threads. A few months after my mom passed away I had to go to the doctor to have my blood pressure meds refilled. I had been out of them for a few days and the stress of my mom passing had my BP going sky high. Plus I didn't have insurance because I had lost my job a few months prior to this. I went to pay the $75 office fee and my check would not go through even though I had the money in the bank. They said I could go and get cash but I would lose my place in line. A gentleman came up to me and paid my fee with cash and just told me to pass it on when I offered to pay him back. I was still in shock when I went back to see the doctor and he actually called the pharmacy while I was sitting there and tried to pay for my meds with his credit card. Since they wouldn't take it over the phone, he gave me all the cash he had and told me to just keep my head up because things would get better. TL. DR stranger paid for office visit and doctor paid for medicines. When I was homeless I met the owner of a local Irish bar in Lexington, KY who let me stay there and hang out during the day to drink water so I would stay out of the cold during the winter. He would also from time to time buy me a pitcher of beer. I was homeless for 7 months and lived in my car. I refused to stay in the shelters because they were full of freaks and bedbugs. Nicest thing ever done to me. Still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. Not me, but I was pretty impressed by this. My boyfriend was driving his Mustang home in a heck of a snowstorm and got stuck. 2 Russian men stopped and helped him push and shovel the car out. A while later, on the same road, it happens again, and the same men help him once more. I was so glad he made it home safely. Thanks random Russian dudes. Dang those Mustangs. I have an 05 that I just hate driving in the snow. It is fun other times of the year though. On our honeymoon, we'd bought and written a bunch of postcards to send to people, then had put them in the glove compartment of the rental car and forgotten them. Someone, either an employee at the rental car company or the next person to rent the car, put stamps on them and mailed them for us. That's one of my favorite good deeds. Simple, something that someone probably wouldn't even think of, but so incredibly kind. I'm glad you were lucky enough to have this random stranger help you out. Me and a friend were walking home from the store after buying beer. We were extremely yes-faced at this point already. About halfway home I dropped 2 6-packs of glass bottles because I tripped. I was trying my damnedest to pick up all of the shards of broken glass off the sidewalk when an elderly man thanked me for cleaning up my mess and gave me a 20 to go buy some more. Never will I hear this story again. I was with my boyfriend lost in Kyoto, Japan. We were trying to find a bike rental shop to bike around the city. We had the map which showed us where the shop was, but we could not find it. My boyfriend went into a store and tried to get directions, desperately trying to explain to the women in hand motions what we were looking for. A guy came up to him and asked if he was lost. My boyfriend told him the situation and our plan. The guy replied, "Oh, those places are far. It's my day off. I'll just drive you." So all day long this guy drove us from site to site and let us explore while he waited for us. At the end of the day he wouldn't even accept gas money. The Japanese are the coolest people. When I was maybe 12, my stepdad took me and my brother to a movie rental place by our house, and we sat in his truck while he went inside. The truck is pretty big, so all 3 of us sat in the front seat with my brother in the middle. We asked my stepdad to leave the keys in the ignition so we could listen to music. While we waited, I observed a group of people sitting outside a Mexican restaurant talking loudly and laughing. Being the stupid, naive 12-year-old I was, I scoffed and called them drunkies. I'm not exactly sure what happened next. My brother swears he barely touched the gear shift, but the truck started to roll backwards out of the parking space. Instead of reacting the way I should have by telling my brother to push on the brakes, I opened the door and jumped out, calling his name in fear. My panic sort of influenced my brother, who jumped out as well. The group of people sitting outside noticed our screams, and they ran over to the truck and they were able to stop it from hitting anything. One guy got into the driver's seat and steered the truck back into place while the others pushed. They asked if we were okay, and we said yes. My stepdad came outside and was obviously confused as to why there were a bunch of guys pushing his truck. They explained, and he thanked them for helping. I don't even remember saying thank you at all, but to this day I regret calling them drunkies and I hate 12-year-old me. TL. DR. A bunch of guys saved me and my brother. We all hate 12-year-old us. Around 2008ish my family and I went to Disney and my uncle had previously mentioned that one of my cousins, who has Down syndrome, was in love with Rafiki from The Lion King. Now this was prior to the re-release and all of that, so this monkey was non-existent as near as we could tell. We casually looked with no success but still kept our eyes open. I have food allergies, but one place we could eat was Pizza Planet since they used whole mozzarella and so forth, and while we were hanging out there, my mom and I found a claw machine that had graffiti in it. We put money in this machine over and over and over and kept winning toys, but he was pretty deep and probably had been in there a while. We didn't want the other toys, so we started giving them to the kids in the play area. When an employee noticed, she asked what the heck we were doing, and when we explained we were trying to win this specific toy for my disabled cousin, she put credits on the machine and walked away. This continued for a very long time. We would win a toy, stick money on the machine, and then she would walk by and add more credits until finally my mom and I won Rafiki. It was a pretty amazing victory and act of kindness that was only possible because of this employee helping us out. TLDR. An employee put credits on a claw machine so we could win a specific toy for my disabled cousin, who still hasn't loved said toy. When I was a kid, some scumbag stole my new hat right off my head in the middle of a crowded city center. I gave chase but couldn't catch them. I was pretty upset given that it was a stylish new hat and no one attempted to stop them as they ran away. Admittedly, most probably didn't see it. Anyways, some random street vendor selling hats, scarves, gloves etc saw what happened, called me over and offered me a choice of hat for free. Naturally I chose the Willy Pokemon one with a Pikachu embossed on it. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me at that moment in time. The same thing, but with a much older and inexpensive phone. I lost it in a thunderstorm and a woman and her daughter found it 6 months later and called my landline to let me know. It still worked perfectly. Another happened a few weeks ago when I was taking several packages to the post office. I was trying to juggle them all at the same time because I didn't feel like making 3 trips, and an older gentleman, maybe in his late 50s to early 60s, was on his cell phone passing by my car. He said, "I'll call you back. I need to help someone," and without a word picked up 2 of my boxes and walked in with me. Must have been a Nokia. It was late at night and there was a freezing rainstorm raging. I had missed my bus that took me a block from my place and had to take another bus that took me about 2 kilometers from home. The bus driver asked me where I was heading. I told him the general area and after a moment's thought asked me for the street. I told him. After a few minutes he looks in his rearview mirror, sees there is only one other person on the bus, and asks him if he's okay with a detour. The other passenger says yes. The bus driver drove me practically to my door. When I was leaving, I thanked him profusely and he just shrugged it off. Awesomest bus driver ever. Bus drivers can be amazing. I was once walking through Houston in the middle of summer, noticed a bus approaching behind me, jokingly put my thumb out. There wasn't a stop anywhere nearby, and the driver pulled over and let me on. One time my mom was in a very shady area when she tripped and accidentally dropped her wallet, but didn't realize it. A day later we get a call from a man say, "We have found your wallet." So we go over to his house in the ghetto, and when I first saw him I was scared surprised. He was about as magnificent as they come. Baggy clothing, tats over his whole body. Anyway, he was nice as pie and gave the wallet back with all its contents and said, "You would have done the same for me, right?" So we said yes and gave him all the cash that was in there as a thank you. You gave him all the cash because of the implication. One time I lost my wallet. Believe I left it on a bus. 2 weeks later, I open up my mailbox to find it wrapped up in brown wrapping paper. Didn't say who found it or anything, but it had everything in there, including my cash, which was around $50. I was a poor uni student. Anyway, several weeks later, I am heading to guitar lesson, and as I get onto the bus, the driver looks at my wallet and says, "I know that wallet." Turns out, he drove to my house and personally placed it in my mailbox for me. He also turned out to be an awesome guitarist and used to be a guitar teacher. His son is a musician with his own jazz band. Every time I saw the driver, when going guitar lessons, he would park the bus on the side of the road and start jamming on my guitar, teaching me bits and pieces. Even gave me his mobile number and asked me to come join him and his band and his son's band in a jam session. I felt sorry for the people on the bus watching their bus driver doing some crazy bars on the guitar. I was rushing across campus because I was going to be late for a test. I had my headphones playing loudly and I couldn't hear anything else. Someone ran up beside me and tapped me on the shoulder. In his hands was the 2 pieces of my inhaler that I had apparently dropped. I thanked him as he ran across the quad and into a different building. Minutes later, I had an asthma attack. I posted on my college's subreddit a thank you, but this stranger potentially saved my life, and I really hope that somebody somewhere did something awesome for him in return. I live a block away from the local park. I was going through some tough times. I was 20 at the time, and decided I needed a walk. It was warm and sunny and I figured it would be helpful to get outside. Just as I get to the park, the clouds burst open and it starts pouring. Dejected, I sat on a swing and stared out into space, just getting soaked. Not sure if I had been there a minute or an hour when I got a tap on the shoulder. I turn around and it's a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, handing me a flower. Across the street I see her mother waving at me. I smiled and waved back, but immediately after the smile disappeared, the little girl grabs me by the hand, leads me to a puddle and jumps at it, splashing me. I just started laughing, messed her hair, said thank you to her and her mom and walked home. I held onto that flower for a while before it withered away. Cringed at the implied perfect world. One day I had lost my tie on the way home to school, part of the uniform. I must have dropped it and not noticed. I realized I had lost it the following morning. As the new day progressed, I knew I would have to get a new tire. The day finished and I am walking home my normal route when I see my tire tied up on a fence. I smile and united it and walked joyfully home. When I was 2, a hotel roommate at Disney World took time out of her day to find out the name, address of my family and mail back my security blanket. I still have it 14 years later. It's gotten me through a lot of scary things like growing up. Disney is good like that. I was pickpocketed at a Blue Man Group performance and had my Ipod Touch stolen. A week or so later I got an email from somebody who had it. Turns out they bought it after being told it was new, saw my name and school lasered into the back, looked me up, and returned it. They ate the cost they paid for it by returning it. I can't believe I got it back. The idea that someone tried to sell something as new when it has a name etched onto it. The stupidity. It hurts. I hope that person fricked the thief over royally. My brother's iPhone fell out of his pocket one morning near his school. He noticed it in class and left school to find his iPhone by retracing his steps. Nothing was found. He was super bummed out. After work, I tried calling thinking it dropped in my car since I drove him to school that morning. No ringtone. 5 minutes later, my brother called back. A guy on the other line said, "Hi, my grandma found this phone. Is it yours?" I said yes, and he invited me over to his house to pick up the phone. He gave me his address. I met up with him at the front door at his house and he gave it back to me with smiles. He didn't ask for money or anything. I shook his and grandma's hands. I met the dude's mom too. His grandma wanted to call me back a long time ago, but she didn't know how to use an iPhone until her grandson got home. I landed at the airport in New York City, having just endured a 24-hour connecting flight delay plus cancellation in a non-English speaking airport, which had finally resulted in a reroute through 2 other countries over the next 12 hours. I hadn't slept more than 2-3 hours in 40 hours of travel because I couldn't sleep while the flight delays kept being lengthened in a place I couldn't understand the announcements. During the rerouted flight, I caught a cold from the guy next to me. I'm allergic and intolerant to all normal foods including gluten, so there was nothing for me to eat safely in any airport. I'd resorted to eating stuff that made me nauseous and gave me bad digestion and acne, so I felt like I was dying and I was a complete mess. The extreme flight delays caused me to miss my connecting flight out of NYC home to Los Angeles. I stumbled into the NYC terminal, lugging my bag, and stayed awake long enough to figure out the train and make it to the customer service desk of my Lost Connections airline. I walk up to the attendant guy, literally hunched over because I could barely keep going, looking like heck and barely able to speak. I croak out my story since the only hope I have is that someone takes sympathy on me and helps me out. Did I mention I only had $50 to my name? Not enough to buy a new ticket, or even rent a room for one night in NYC. This guy tells me that it would be at least $1,200 for a flight out that day, and most flights were booked. Hopelessly, I said, "I have $50. Is there anything I can do?" He looks at me a second, then asks only for my name and whether I have checked baggage. I tell him my name. and no checked baggage. He prints out a boarding pass, not a ticket or anything, an actual boarding pass. He tells me my flight to LA boards in 20 minutes, so I'd better hurry, and to make sure I don't have any liquids so I'm not delayed at baggage inspection. He says he's not supposed to do this, so don't let anyone else know. I thanked him profusely, promised that I'd never tell anyone his part, deliberately didn't look at his name tag so I wouldn't know his name, and dumped all my hygiene stuff into a trash can on my way to the gate. Turns out the flight was so full that they had to give some people refunds on their tickets and have them stay the night in NYC, but I already had a boarding pass, so I got right on that plane and flew home. That flight was a nightmare of its own, and I'm pretty sure I gave everyone on that plane a nose cold direct from the other side of the world. This is how the zombie infection will spread, folks, I guarantee it. Pretty mundane, but it saved me when I needed to get back to my car. I was down in San Francisco, Berkeley-ish, and I needed 10 cents extra for the BART ticket, and the machine kept refusing my last dime, which as it turned out was a Canadian dime. Thus why some woman behind me handed me a dime, and I was very happy. I thanked her, got my pass, and managed to make it back to El Charito to get to my car so I could drive back home. I got robbed by my taxi driver in a Cyprus, 20-year-old girl and alone. He took all my money and cards. I then had to hitchhike to Nicosia from Polis because I had no money and no way to get money. Luckily, I was able to use a random Cypriot's phone to call my friend Orestes back in London. My French phone didn't work outside of France. He told me that if I could get to a certain hotel in Nicosia, I forget which, his two friends would meet me there and take me in for the remainder of the trip. So I walked along dirt roads, alongside sheep and orange trees, until random strangers took me with them step by step to Nicosia. None of them wanted anything in return, and those who spoke English told me their awesome life stories. Some of them even invited me to stay at their homes and join them for dinner. Orestes' friends, who had never even heard of me, took me into their home, fed me, showed me around Cyprus, and even drove me to Larnaca to go to the airport. They never let me pay for anything. Other than the man who robbed me, I was overwhelmed by the kindness of complete strangers in Cyprus. Sort of along the same lines as yours. I was probably about 6 years old. My parents had taken me to Disney World for my birthday, and I brought my favorite stuffed animal Linus style security blanket, which happened to be a stuffed unicorn. Distracted by Figment the Epcot dragon, I lost it on the day before we were going to leave. I remember my parents reporting it in the lost and found at our hotel, but we were in a huge rush to get to the airport, and even at 6 I didn't have high expectations for its return. So much so that I attempted to smuggle myself back into the park for a unicorn rescue mission since I couldn't go home without it. This was subsequently foiled by my parents. About a month later I get a package from Canada with my stuffed unicorn and a note from the little girl who found it, saying that she thought that I was probably very sad that I had lost it. I still have no idea how they figured out who to send it to, since it was only reported lost in one hotel in all of Disney and it didn't have my name on it anywhere. I can only assume they must have called around and actually put a ton of work into returning it. It was probably one of the happiest moments of my childhood, and I honestly hope nothing but good things happen to that family for their entire lives. There was just a thread about a lost wedding ring at Disney. Apparently they are just straight up bosses in the Disney Lost and Found department. 1980. Headed home to Ontario, Canada for Christmas after spending 2 years on the hippie trail in Europe. Hitchhiking on a freeway in Detroit in the middle of the night during a full-on blizzard. Guy picked me up and drove me across the border. Went way out of his way. I may single-handedly have been the reason no hitchhiking signs started showing up on freeways in the 80s. I didn't know you couldn't hitchhike on a freeway. I think those laws were just being enacted about the time. I didn't know Detroit was a bit of a rough town. Try that crap today, I would probably be taken in for a psych evaluation. I know. In my senior year of high school, my baseball team won the state tournament at the 5A level of competition. We felt great about it and designed really nice championship rings for our accomplishment. That summer I moved to California, and during my stay, my apartment was burglarized. I moved back home a few months later, son ring, among other things, knowing that I would never see it again. The following month, now October, I received a package in the mail with my ring in it. He had looked up the high school, found the contact information of the coach, who gave a random person my address, and paid for the shipping to send it to me with a letter. It said, "I found this on the beach. It looks important." Not as heartwarming as everyone else's stories, but here it goes. Came home one day, saw UPS had misdelivered a package to my house. It was a box of frozen steaks or meats or something. It was supposed to go to a house a couple down from mine. So I'll look up their phone number and give them a ring just to make sure someone was there to freeze their meats. My neighbor, who I have never spoken to before, tells me not to walk them over but just wait about 20 minutes for him to come over. Confused, I say sure and wait for him. He comes over with a big tray of freshly baked cookies his wife just made for me as a way of saying thanks. Seemed like an overblown way of saying thanks for doing absolutely nothing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.